had a stroke on a Tuesday morning in March. I know it was a Tuesday because I just put the trash cans out by the curb, something I've done every Tuesday for 31 years at that same house on Clover Mill Road. I remember the way the cold air hit my face when I opened the front door, and I remember thinking I needed to call my daughter back. She'd left a voicemail the night before. Something about money again, something about her husband's business. And I'd been putting off calling because I already knew what she wanted and I already knew I was going to say yes. I never made that call. I woke up on the kitchen floor with half my face feeling like it had been packed in wet sand. The left side. I couldn't lift my arm. The phone was on the counter, maybe 4 feet away, and it took me the better part of 20 minutes to drag myself close enough to knock it down and dial 911. My name is Leonard, and I'm 68 years old. I worked 32 years as a civil engineer for the county. I raised one child in that house on Clover Mill Road, my daughter, Meredith. Her mother, my wife, Gloria, passed from breast cancer 11 years ago, and after that, it was just the two of us. I want to be honest with you. Meredith was not always the way she became. When she was young, when she was in high school, and even through most of college, she was thoughtful. She called on Sundays. She sent cards on my birthday that she actually wrote things inside, not just her name. She sat with her mother in the hospital during the last weeks without me ever having to ask. I don't know exactly when things shifted. Maybe when she married Curtis. Maybe before that. Maybe I made mistakes. I still can't see clearly. But by the time I had that stroke on the kitchen floor, I had lent my daughter and her husband over $90,000 across 6 years. Money for a restaurant that failed, money for Curtis's investment in a gym franchise that never opened, money to cover 2 months of rent when Curtis quit his job to focus on his brand, whatever that meant. I never asked for a repayment schedule. I never put anything in writing. I just wired the money, or wrote the checks, because she was my daughter, and I loved her, and I told myself, that's what parents do. The paramedics came. I don't remember much of the ambulance ride. I remember fluorescent lights and someone asking me if I knew what day it was, and I couldn't answer right, which frightened me more than anything else had ever frightened me in my life. They admitted me to the stroke unit at Hargrove Regional Medical Center. The neurologist told me I'd had an ischemic stroke, a clot, not a bleed, and that I was lucky I'd gotten there when I did. He said the recovery would take time. He said I'd need occupational therapy, physical therapy, that I might regain full function on my left side, or I might not. He said these things very calmly, the way doctors do, and I nodded and asked what I needed to do, because that is the only way I know how to respond to hard news. The hospital called Meredith as my emergency contact. She arrived that evening. I was in the bed, my left arm connected to monitors, still struggling to form certain words clearly. She stood in the doorway first, just stood there for a moment, and I saw something cross her face that I didn't want to name at the time. She came in, sat down, asked how I was feeling. I told her what the doctor had said. She nodded. Then she said, "Dad, I need to know about the house." I thought I'd misheard her. The stroke, the medication. What? The house on Clover Mill Road. If something happens to you, I need to know what the plan is. I looked at her for a long moment. I was 68 years old with monitors on my chest, and I still couldn't fully close my left hand. And my daughter was asking me about the house. "Meredith," I said, "I just had a stroke." She said she knew that. She said she was worried. She said she just wanted to make sure everything was in order. She stayed maybe 45 minutes. She said she'd check on me, that she'd call in the morning. She squeezed my right hand at the door and left. She did not call in the morning. She didn't call the day after that either. A nurse named Patricia checked on me every few hours, not just routine vitals. She actually stopped and talked. She asked me how I slept, whether the food was tolerable, whether my words were coming easier. On the third day, she brought me a word puzzle book because she said it was good for the kind of recovery I was doing. I told her my daughter was supposed to be coming by, and Patricia just nodded and said, "People get scared when someone they love is sick." I think she was being kind. I don't think that was what was happening with Meredith. On the fourth day, Curtis called. Not Meredith. Curtis called. Not Meredith. Curtis. He asked how I was doing. Briefly, the way you asked before you get to the actual point. And then he said that he and Meredith had been thinking, and that they felt like the house on Clover Mill Road was too much for one person to maintain, and that it might be a good time to think about selling. He said the market was good right now. He said they'd been talking to a realtor. He said the proceeds could go toward my care, and that whatever was left over, well, we'd figure that out as a family. My care. I was 4 days post-stroke. I was doing occupational therapy in the morning and physical therapy in the afternoon, and I was going to walk out of that hospital and go home to my house that I had paid off in 2019. I didn't say any of that to Curtis. I said I was tired and I'd have to call him back, and I hung up. I lay in that hospital bed for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling tiles, listening to the machines. I thought about Gloria. I used to talk through problems with her. She was sharper than me in the ways that mattered, the people-reading ways. She would have known what was happening long before I did. She would have said something to me years ago, gently but directly, the way she always did. She would have said, "Leonard, you need to stop writing checks and start paying attention." I started paying attention. I asked Patricia if there was a social worker or patient advocate I could speak with. She connected me with a woman named Judith who worked for the hospital's patient services department. I asked Judith what my rights were regarding my own property and financial decisions while I was hospitalized and cognitively intact. She explained everything clearly. She also mentioned that some families, in situations like mine, found it useful to consult with an elder law attorney before discharge, just to make sure everything was properly documented. I asked her if she could help me arrange that. She could. An attorney named Mr. Ari Calloway came to my room the next morning. He was a quiet man, probably mid-50s, the kind of person who takes notes with a real pen. I told him everything. The $90,000 across 6 years. The calls I'd been avoiding. What Curtis said on the phone. The question about the house 4 hours after my stroke. He didn't react dramatically. He just took notes. Then he asked me about my will, my financial power of attorney, my healthcare directive. I had a will. I'd made one after Gloria died. But it needed updating. My financial POA listed Meredith as my agent. "Do you still want her in that role?" Mr. Calloway asked. I thought about it for longer than I probably should have. She was my daughter. She used to sit with her mother in the hospital without being asked. "No," I said. "I don't." We spent 2 hours that morning. Mr. Calloway drafted new documents. I signed them in front of a notary that Judith arranged. I revoked Meredith's financial power of attorney and designated instead a longtime friend of mine, a retired school principal named Harold, whom I have known since 1987, and who has never once asked me for a single thing. I also updated my will, significantly. I did not cut Meredith out entirely. I want to be honest about that, too. She's still my daughter. But the house on Clover Mill Road and the majority of my estate are now held in a revocable living trust, with clear conditions and a trustee, who is not Curtis and is not anyone Curtis could charm. What Meredith receives, she receives when I am gone and when the trustee, Harold, determines the conditions have been met. Until then, the house is mine, and no one can pressure me into a sale. I also called my bank. I removed Meredith from the joint checking account she'd been on since Gloria died, when I'd added her out of practicality. I opened a new account. I changed my online banking passwords and my email password. I called the attorney's office that had drafted my original will and gave them instructions. Then I lay back against the hospital pillow and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger. Something quieter than that. Something quieter than that. Something closer to solid ground. Patricia came in to check on me that afternoon, and I must have looked different, because she said, "You seem better today." I told her I'd had a productive morning. She laughed. She had a good laugh. Meredith finally came on the 6th day. I had been in the hospital for 6 days. She walked in with a tray of coffee, 2 cups, one for each of us, which I thought was a nice gesture, until she sat down and I saw her face. She had the look of someone who has rehearsed. "Dad," she started, "Curtis and I have been doing a lot of thinking, and we just want to make sure that you're taken care of. That's all we want." I let her talk. She said things about the house being old, about maintenance, about how hard it would be for me to manage alone after what had happened. She said she and Curtis had spoken with a realtor who thought they could get a very good price, and that they'd already looked at some assisted living communities nearby. Nice ones, she said, really nice ones, and that I wouldn't have to worry about anything. She did not ask how my physical therapy was going. She did not ask whether my words were coming back. She did not ask if I was scared or tired or if I missed home. She asked, near the end, if I'd thought about updating my financial POA, because she wanted to make sure she could help manage things if she needed to. I sipped my coffee. It was a little too sweet for me, but I drank it. Meredith, I said, I've already taken care of it. She blinked. What do you mean? My documents. All of it. I worked with an attorney this week. Everything is updated. I watched her try to read my face. So, I'm still listed as... No, I said. You're not. The room got very quiet. Outside, in the hall, someone was wheeling a cart past the doorway, wheels squeaking on the linoleum. Dad, I'm not angry with you, I said. And I meant it. I was tired of being angry. At her, at Curtis, at myself for all the checks I wrote and all the calls I avoided. But I know what's been going on. I know about the conversations you and Curtis have been having. I know you spoke to a realtor before I had even been discharged. I know why Curtis called me on day 4. She started to say something about how they were just trying to help, just trying to plan ahead, that she was worried. I believe you're worried, I said. I just think you're worried about different things than I am. She left not long after that. She wasn't cruel about it. She didn't raise her voice. She picked up her coffee cup and her purse, and she said she needed some air, and she walked out. I didn't stop her. I went home, 8 days after I'd been admitted. Harold picked me up. He drove me to the house on Clover Mill Road, helped me get settled, made sure I had groceries. He didn't make a big deal about anything. That's Harold. He asked if I needed him to stay, and I said no, and he believed me, and he left. That's the kind of friendship worth having. My occupational therapist, a young woman named Dana, came to the house 3 times a week for the first month. My left arm came back faster than they'd expected. Not quite what it was, but functional. My speech came back mostly clean, though I still sometimes lose a word mid-sentence and have to fish around for it. It's strange to be in your own mind and feel a word slip away from you like a wet bar of soap. But I'm here. I'm in my house. I can walk to the mailbox and back without stopping to rest. And last week I took the trash cans out to the curb on a Tuesday morning and came back inside and made myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table where Gloria's African violet is still on the windowsill, 11 years on, still alive. I want to tell you about the envelope, because that's what keeps running through my head. About 3 weeks after I came home, I got a call from Curtis. He said Meredith was upset. He said she felt ambushed, blindsided, that I'd made major decisions without including her. He said they'd consulted a family law attorney. I assumed to explore whether they had any claim on the house, though Curtis didn't phrase it that way, and he wanted to know if we could talk this through like adults. I said yes. I said I'd meet them the following Saturday at my house, at 10 in the morning. I called Harold that same afternoon and told him. I also called Mr. Calloway and asked a few questions. I wanted to understand exactly what authority Curtis and Meredith had over my affairs, now that the documents were updated. The answer was none. Saturday morning, they arrived at 9:58. Meredith looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. Curtis was wearing a blazer, like he was coming to negotiate. I made coffee, got the sweetness right this time, and we sat down at the kitchen table. I had a folder on the table. Inside the folder were 2 things. A printed copy of the updated trust documents, which Mr. Mershram, Calloway, had sent me, and a summary, 1 page, typed, of every loan I had made to Meredith and Curtis over 6 years. Date, amount, purpose stated at the time, $93,400. I slid it across the table. Curtis looked at it. Meredith looked at it. I'm not suing you, I said. I'm not going to pursue this legally. The money is gone, and I've accepted that. I kept my voice even. I had practiced this, not to be cold, but because I had learned from Gloria that the most important conversations deserve to be had carefully. But I want you both to understand what I understand, and I want there to be no more confusion about the house. Curtis started to say something about how those were gifts, how there was never a formal loan agreement. You're right, I said. There wasn't. That was my mistake. I should have put things in writing. I didn't because I trusted my daughter. I looked at Meredith when I said it. I'm not making that mistake again. About anything. We sat there for a while. Curtis drank his coffee. Meredith didn't touch hers. Then Meredith said something I wasn't expecting. She didn't argue or defend herself. She just said, very quietly, I didn't realize how much it had added up to. I believed her about that part. I think she'd let herself not think about it, the way we do with things we don't want to see, and I think Curtis had made it easy for her not to think about it, because Curtis is very good at reframing things as reasonable when they aren't. I know, I said. But now you do. I told him that I was not interested in cutting Meredith out of my life. She is my daughter. I love her in the way you love someone you've known since they were 4 pounds and not quite finished yet. Someone you drove to the ER twice for stitches and once for a broken wrist. Someone you watched graduate and marry and struggle and sometimes shine. That doesn't just go away. I don't want it to go away. But I also told her that things were going to be different, that there would be no more loans, that the house decisions were mine alone, that if she and Curtis wanted a relationship with me, a real one, it would have to be built on something other than what it had been built on. She cried a little. Curtis looked at the table. They left around noon. I washed the coffee cups and put them away and stood at the kitchen window for a while, looking at the backyard. The oak tree back there was putting out the first pale green of early spring, that tentative color that comes before you're sure winter is actually finished. I don't know what happens next with Meredith. I'd be lying if I said I did. She's called twice since then. Short calls, careful ones, like someone learning to walk on ice. I answer. We talk about small things. I think that might be how it goes for a while. And I think that might be okay. What I know is this. I am 68 years old and I had a stroke and I survived it. And I went home to my house, and my house is still my house. I know what's in my documents, and I know what's in my accounts, and I know what I trust and why I trust them. I had lost track of some of that over the years, the slow drift of too much giving and not enough honesty, with her, with myself. Gloria would have shaken her head at me, lovingly, the way she did. I think about something Patricia said to me near the end of my stay, when I told her what I'd done with the documents, with the attorney, all of it. She looked at me for a moment and then said, Some people wait until everything falls apart before they get clear. You got clear while you still had time. I've turned that over in my mind a lot since then. I don't think I'm a wise man. I think I was a man who loved his daughter more than he was careful, and who let that go on too long, and who got sick in a way that, as strange as it sounds, forced me to finally see what I'd been avoiding. Sometimes it takes something that serious. I wish it hadn't. But here I am. The African violet is still on the windowsill. The trash goes out every Tuesday. And I am still, very much, in my own house. I've been thinking a lot about cause and effect lately. Not in any grand philosophical way, just the plain, practical kind. The kind where you look back at a chain of events, and you can see, clearly, how one thing led to the next, how the first check I wrote led to a second, how the second led to a silence where there should have been a conversation, how that silence stretched over 6 years until I was lying on a kitchen floor and my daughter's first real concern was about the square footage of the house I was lying in. I don't say that to be bitter. I say it because it's true, and because I think honesty is the only thing that actually helps once the dust settles. Here is what I've learned about character. Not from a book, not from anyone telling me, but from living 68 years and paying attention, especially the parts I didn't want to pay attention to. Character is not what a person does when things are going well. Character is what a person reaches for when they're scared and things are hard and nobody is watching. Meredith was scared. I believe that. But what she reached for when she was scared was not me. It was my assets. And that told me something I needed to know. It was my assets. And that told me something about myself, because that made it easy for her to think that way. Not on purpose. I never sat down and decided to raise a daughter who would ask about my house 4 hours after my stroke. But I built conditions, slowly, over years, where money moved from me to her, with no weight attached, no accountability, no honest conversation about what it meant or what it cost. I confused generosity with love, and I let that confusion run long past the point where it was doing either of us any good. That is on me. I own that. What I also own now is the clarity I didn't have before. Harold picking me up from the hospital. Dana helping me relearn how to grip a coffee cup with my left hand. Patricia saying, "You got clear while you still had time." Those things didn't happen to me randomly. They happened because I finally stopped avoiding the truth about what was going on in my own house, my own family, my own finances. The moment I picked up that phone from the kitchen floor and called 911, something shifted in me. Not just physically. I stopped waiting for things to be okay on their own. That is the thing about resilience that nobody talks about enough. It is not about being tough. It is not about not feeling the hurt. I felt it, sitting in that hospital bed on day 4, staring at the ceiling after Curtis's phone call. I felt something I can only describe as a loneliness so specific and so heavy that it had a physical weight. But I didn't stay there. I asked for a social worker. I asked for an attorney. I made the calls I should have made years earlier, and I made them from a hospital bed with monitors on my chest and a left arm that still wasn't working right. That is what resilience actually looks like. Not the absence of pain. The decision to act anyway. The folder on that kitchen table, the one Meredith and Curtis sat across from on a Saturday morning. That folder didn't appear by accident. It was the result of every honest conversation I finally had with myself about what I had allowed and what I was no longer willing to allow. It was the result of getting clear. I don't know what kind of daughter Meredith becomes from here. I hope she becomes the kind she used to be, before the years of easy money made it too simple not to think. I'm leaving that door open, but I am done walking through it for her. The African violet on the windowsill doesn't ask for much. A little light, a little water, consistency. It's been alive 11 years because I show up for it in small, reliable ways. That is probably the truest thing I know about how to take care of something you love. Show up for it, honestly, consistently, before it ends up on the floor.